I am Madison Mitchell, 34 years old, and my hands were trembling as I arrived at my brother Thomas's wedding rehearsal. A year ago at Thanksgiving, he had publicly declared, "My little sister is nothing but a disappointment to this family. She'll never be welcome in my home." Those words cut deeper than he knew. Yet here I stood, now the youngest judge in our district, about to face my family again. Nothing prepared me for the moment his fiancée spotted me across the room, gasped audibly, quickly curtsied, and said, "Your Honor, I didn't know you'd be here." Before I tell you how I went from family disappointment to respected judge, drop a comment below about where you're watching from. And hit that like and subscribe button to follow my journey of resilience. Growing up in our wealthy Boston suburb, the Mitchell family name carried weight. Our sprawling colonial home with its manicured gardens hosted cocktail parties where my father Robert, a third-generation investment banker, networked with the city's elite. My mother Elizabeth, always impeccably dressed, orchestrated these social events with precision while maintaining her position on multiple charity boards. In this world of old money and older traditions, my brother Thomas, 5 years my senior, was groomed from birth to be the golden child. "Thomas has your grandfather's business sense," my father would proudly tell colleagues while ruffling my brother's hair. At family gatherings, relatives would ask Thomas about his future plans while I was complimented on my dress or hair. The message was clear. Thomas would inherit the family legacy while I was expected to make a suitable marriage. Even in elementary school, the contrasts were stark. When Thomas brought home B+ grades, my father would take him for ice cream to celebrate. When I earned straight A's, the response was a distracted "That's nice, Madison," without looking up from the evening paper. My mother would occasionally slip me a proud smile, but never in my father's presence. I still remember finding my mother's college yearbook when I was 9. She had been an English literature major with honors before meeting my father. When I asked her why she never talked about it, she quickly changed the subject and put the yearbook away. Later that night, I overheard her telling my father, "Madison asks too many questions." He replied, "Don't worry, she'll outgrow it." But I didn't outgrow my curiosity or my desire for something more than the path laid out for me. By 12, I was borrowing books about famous female leaders and hiding them under my bed. At 13, I announced at dinner that I wanted to become a lawyer. My father chuckled, "Women don't do well in high-pressure careers, sweetheart. You're too emotional." Thomas, mimicking our father's dismissive tone, added, "Besides, who would want a lawyer for a wife?" There was a time, though, when Thomas had been different. When I was 7 and he was 12, I had been bullied by a neighborhood boy. Thomas had stood up for me, firmly telling the boy to leave his sister alone. "Nobody gets to be mean to Madison except me," he joked afterward, but with a protective arm around my shoulders. I often wondered when that boy had disappeared, replaced by a young man desperate for our father's approval. By high school, the divide between us grew wider. Thomas joined the same prestigious private school clubs our father had once led, while I threw myself into debate team and mock trial. When I won a statewide debate championship, my parents didn't attend. Thomas was playing in a golf tournament that day, and that took priority. When I brought home the trophy, my father glanced at it and said, "That's fine for now, but these extracurriculars won't matter once you're married." My mother occasionally tried to bridge the gap. Once, after a particularly tense dinner where my father criticized my argumentative nature, she came to my room and sat on my bed. "Your father just wants what's best for you," she said softly. When I asked if she had given up her own dreams for what father thought was best, she left without answering, but I saw the truth in her eyes. Thomas, meanwhile, transformed from the occasionally protective big brother to my father's echo. "Madison, why do you always have to make things difficult?" became his refrain whenever I questioned family traditions or expectations. By the time I was preparing for college applications, Thomas rarely addressed me directly at family gatherings. instead performing for our father's approval with comments about family loyalty and knowing one's place. Our extended family reinforced these dynamics. At holiday gatherings, aunts would pull me aside to ask if I was dating anyone serious, while uncles talked to Thomas about networking opportunities. My paternal grandmother once told me, "A woman's greatest achievement is supporting her husband and raising children who honor the family name." When I suggested there might be other achievements worth pursuing, the disapproving glances around the table told me I had crossed a line. Despite it all, I maintained my course. I joined a pre-law program at my high school, volunteered at a legal aid clinic, and applied to colleges with strong political science departments, all while watching Thomas absorb our father's worldview like a sponge, transforming from the boy who had once defended me into someone who saw me as an embarrassment to the Mitchell name. The college acceptance letters arrived during my senior year of high school. Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, my father's approved list, all offered me spots. But so did Berkeley, with its progressive reputation and outstanding law program preparation. During dinner, I announced my decision to attend Berkeley instead of Harvard, my father's alma mater. The crystal water glass in my father's hand hit the table with a sharp crack. Absolutely not. No daughter of mine is going to that liberal cesspool. His face had turned a dangerous shade of red. Berkeley has one of the best pre-law programs in the country, I countered, my voice surprisingly steady. Harvard was good enough for generations of Mitchells, Thomas interjected, ever the loyal son. Why do you always have to be different, Madison? My father's ultimatum came swiftly: attend Harvard or lose financial support. That night, I applied for student loans and scholarships. 2 weeks later, I confirmed my acceptance at Berkeley. My father didn't speak to me for the remainder of my senior year. Moving across the country was terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who valued ideas over family names. My roommate Jasmine, a first-generation college student from Michigan, became the sister I wished Thomas had been. We stayed up late discussing cases and constitutional law, something I could never have done at home. While I thrived academically at Berkeley, Thomas struggled at Harvard Business School. During rare phone calls with my mother, I would hear whispers about Thomas's adjustment difficulties and my father hiring tutors to help him maintain passing grades. Yet at Thanksgiving of my sophomore year, my parents spoke only of Thomas's challenging curriculum and leadership potential, while my place on the dean's list went unmentioned. "So, Madison, still doing that law thing?" Thomas asked over dessert, his tone making it clear how unimpressive he found my academic path. "Yes, actually. I just got accepted into an honors research program," I replied. "Well, isn't that cute?" he said, exchanging knowing glances with our father. "Still playing dress-up as a career woman?" My mother quickly changed the subject to Thomas's summer internship at our father's firm. That summer, I didn't return home. Instead, I accepted an internship at the Alameda County Courthouse, where Judge Eleanor Washington took me under her wing. A pioneering Black female judge, she showed me what was possible for women who refused to be limited by others' expectations. "Some people will never approve of your path," she told me over lunch one day. "Make peace with that early, and you'll save yourself years of heartache." When Thomas got engaged to Rebecca Wilson during my junior year, the family dynamics crystallized further. Rebecca came from a family similar to ours: old money, conservative values, and clear expectations for women. She had attended Wellesley, earned a degree in art history, and now worked part-time at a gallery owned by a family friend. My mother called her perfect during one of our increasingly rare conversations. The engagement party was scheduled during my final exams. When I explained I couldn't attend, my father's response was cutting. "Your brother is continuing the family legacy while you're off playing revolutionary. Your priorities have always been disappointing." I graduated summa cum laude from Berkeley the following spring. My parents attended but left immediately after the ceremony for Thomas's business school graduation the next day, though he was barely graduating in the middle of his class. The photos from that weekend tell the story. Thomas surrounded by beaming family members after his graduation, champagne glasses raised. Me standing alone in my cap and gown, my chosen family of college friends having already departed for their own family celebrations. Thomas's wedding that summer was a society affair covered by local papers. As a bridesmaid, I stood in professionally applied makeup and a dress I had no input in selecting. Listening to the minister speak about a woman's duty to support her husband's ambitions. Rebecca beamed. My mother dabbed at tears of joy. My father had never looked prouder than when he shook Thomas's hand at the reception. You could have this too, you know, my mother whispered as we watched Thomas and Rebecca's first dance. There's still time to find a nice man and settle down. I flew back to California the next morning, my application to top law schools already in progress. The acceptance to Columbia Law School arrived with an impressive scholarship offer. When I called home with the news, my mother answered with the familiar tension in her voice that appeared whenever she had to navigate between my achievements and my father's disapproval. That's nice, Madison, she said carefully, though I wish you had considered something closer to home. Or perhaps taking some time off. You've always worked so hard. In the background, I heard my father's voice. Is that Madison? Tell her Thomas just closed his first major account. I began law school that fall, throwing myself into my studies while working part-time at a women's legal advocacy center. The work was exhausting but fulfilling, and for the first time, I felt truly aligned with my purpose. My classmates, diverse, ambitious, and supportive, became the community I had always craved. Contact with my family dwindled to obligatory holiday calls and the occasional email. Thomas and Rebecca bought a house in the same exclusive neighborhood as our parents, continuing the Mitchell tradition. Their Christmas card showed them standing in front of a colonial revival nearly identical to our childhood home. Midway through my second year of law school, I received a rare call from my mother. Madison, she began, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. I found some of your articles in that law journal. I had the housekeeper print them for me so your father wouldn't see them on the computer history. A pause. They're very impressive. You write beautifully. Before I could process this unexpected compliment, she continued, but that's not why I called. Thomas and Rebecca are expecting. You're going to be an aunt. The baby shower was scheduled during my mock trial competition. I sent an expensive gift from their registry instead of attending. The thank you note I received was in Rebecca's perfect handwriting. Thank you for the silver baby spoon. We hope you can find time to meet your nephew soon. During my final year of law school, I developed severe pneumonia that landed me in the hospital for a week. My roommate called my parents when my fever reached 104 degrees. My mother sent flowers. My father and Thomas sent nothing. When I called afterward to assure them I was recovering, my father's only comment was, "This is what happens when you push yourself too hard in unsuitable directions." The gulf between us seemed unbridgeable. Yet law school gave me something my family never had, validation based on merit rather than conformity. I graduated at the top of my class and secured a prestigious judicial clerkship with Judge Marilyn Samuels of the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. At the graduation ceremony, I looked out at the audience and found strength in the absence of disapproval rather than the presence of support. My chosen family, friends, mentors, and colleagues cheered loudly enough to fill the void. The evening after graduation, my law school friends threw a celebration dinner. Professor Jacobs, who had become a mentor, raised a glass. To Madison Mitchell, who will change the face of justice in this country. I flew home the next day to pack up my apartment and found an unexpected package waiting. Inside was a small velvet box containing my grandmother's pearl earrings and a note from my mother. These should have gone to you at graduation. I'm sorry I couldn't give them to you in person. I am proud of you, even if I don't say it enough. It was the first crack in the wall between us, a tiny fissure of hope in an otherwise solid barrier of disapproval. My judicial clerkship with Judge Samuels opened doors I hadn't dared dream of. Known for her brilliant legal mind and uncompromising ethics, she pushed me to think deeper, write clearer, and stand firmer in my convictions. During my 2-year clerkship, I helped draft opinions on cases ranging from environmental protection to civil rights, learning how the law could be a powerful tool for positive change when wielded with integrity. You have the mind of a judge, she told me during my performance review. Not just the intellect, but the temperament. You see the humanity behind the cases. After the clerkship, I joined the district attorney's office, handling cases that others often avoided: domestic violence, sexual assault, crimes against children. The work was emotionally draining but deeply meaningful. Within 3 years, I had built a reputation for thorough preparation, ethical prosecution, and unexpected compassion for both victims and defendants. News from home came primarily through my mother's occasional calls. Thomas had been made partner at my father's firm, though rumors suggested it was more nepotism than merit. He and Rebecca had a second child, another boy. My father had had a minor heart attack but recovered quickly. These updates felt like dispatches from a foreign country I once inhabited. Then came the call that changed everything. Judge Raymond Patel, a respected figure on the district court bench, was retiring. My name had been put forward as a potential nominee to fill his seat at just 33, an unusually young age for such a position. The vetting process was intense. Every aspect of my personal and professional life underwent scrutiny. Former classmates, colleagues, even opposing counsel were interviewed about my character and capabilities. Throughout it all, I kept the nomination news from my family, unwilling to hear their dismissal of what could be my greatest achievement. The nomination was announced publicly in October. The local legal newspaper ran a profile highlighting my rapid rise and commitment to justice. 2 days later, my mother called. "Madison, why didn't you tell us? We had to hear about your nomination from the Hendersons at their dinner party." The hurt in her voice was genuine, and for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. "I didn't think you'd be interested," I answered honestly. A long pause followed. "Your father saw the article. He didn't say anything, but he kept it. I found it in his desk drawer." This unexpected revelation left me speechless. After a moment, my mother continued, "We're having Thanksgiving at the house this year. Thomas and Rebecca will be there with the boys. We'd like you to come." Perhaps it was the nomination. Perhaps it was the image of my father secretly saving the article about me, but something made me say yes. After years of minimal contact, I would return home for Thanksgiving. The Mitchell family home looked exactly as I remembered it: imposing, immaculate, and cold. My mother greeted me with an awkward hug, her perfume familiar and nostalgic. My father offered a stiff nod and a formal handshake. Thomas and Rebecca arrived minutes later with their sons, 5-year-old Robert and 3-year-old James, dressed in matching holiday outfits. "Madison," Thomas acknowledged me coolly. Rebecca offered a practice smile and air kisses. The boys, coached to be polite, shook my hand with solemn little faces. The initial conversation was painfully stilted. Weather, traffic, safe topics that required no emotional investment. My mother filled silences with unnecessary details about the turkey preparation. My father asked superficial questions about my flight. Thomas said nothing directly to me at all. Dinner began with my father's traditional carving of the turkey and a formal grace, thanking God for family and prosperity. The tension eased slightly as food was passed and wine poured. My mother asked gentle questions about my life in California. I shared sanitized anecdotes about work, carefully avoiding anything that might spark conflict. Then my father cleared his throat. "So, Madison, this judgeship, it's quite unusual for someone your age." Was that a hint of pride in his voice? I couldn't tell. Yes, the nomination was unexpected, but I'm honored by the confidence in my abilities. The confirmation hearing is next month, he asked, surprising me with this knowledge. Yes, December 15th. Thomas set down his wine glass with unnecessary force. I'm sure it will be interesting to see if they confirm someone with so little real-world experience. And there it was, the familiar dismissal. Actually, I responded evenly. My experience in the DA's office has been quite substantive. I've handled over 200 cases, including several high-profile prosecutions. Playing lawyer for a few years hardly qualifies you to be a judge, Thomas scoffed. Some of us have built actual careers based on family tradition and solid values. My mother's eyes darted nervously between us. Rebecca, didn't you say you redecorated the boys' playroom? Tell Madison about it. But Thomas wasn't finished. That's always been your problem, Madison. You think you're so special with your progressive ideas and disregard for tradition. While I've been upholding our family's legacy, you've been off doing whatever you please. Thomas, my mother said softly, not at Thanksgiving, please. My father, surprisingly, also attempted intervention. Let's discuss something else. But Thomas had been drinking steadily throughout dinner, and years of resentment fueled his words. No, I think it's time we're honest. Madison abandoned this family and everything we stand for. She rejected every opportunity handed to her on a silver platter to play social justice warrior 3,000 miles away. I maintained my composure, years of courtroom experience helping me keep my voice steady. I didn't abandon the family, Thomas. I chose a different path, one that has meaning to me. Meaning? Thomas laughed bitterly. You mean feeling superior to your family? Looking down on our values while pretending to champion the downtrodden. That's not fair, I began. But Thomas was fully launched now. You know what's not fair? Having to explain to my colleagues why my sister isn't part of the family business. Having to make excuses for why you're never at family events. Having to listen to people talk about seeing your name in the newspaper while you can't even bother to call home. The dinner table fell silent. Even the children sensed the tension. Their small forks paused mid-bite. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said finally. But I'm not going to apologize for following my own path. Thomas's face reddened. Always so self-righteous. You haven't changed a bit. He pushed back from the table and stood, towering over the elaborate Thanksgiving spread. Let me make something perfectly clear. My little sister is nothing but a disappointment to this family. She'll never be welcome in my home. The words hung in the air like shattered glass. My mother gasped. Rebecca stared fixedly at her plate. My father's face remained impassive, neither contradicting nor supporting his son's declaration. I placed my napkin beside my barely touched plate and stood. Thank you for dinner, Mother. I think it's best if I leave now. No one moved to stop me as I collected my coat and purse. No one followed me to the door. As I stepped into the cold November night, I heard my mother's muffled sobs and my father's low, indecipherable murmur. In my rental car, I sat for a long moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. Then my phone chimed with a notification. It was an email from Senator Harris's office. My confirmation hearing had been moved up. The Senate Judiciary Committee would consider my nomination in 2 weeks. I started the car and drove away from my childhood home, leaving behind the weight of disapproval I had carried for too long. Whatever happened at the confirmation hearing, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was done seeking approval from those who would never give it. The confirmation hearing was brutal but swift. Republican senators questioned my youth and limited experience. Democratic senators highlighted my prosecution record and academic achievements. I answered each question with the calm clarity I had developed both in courtrooms and at Mitchell family dinners. When Senator Michaels asked why I believed I was qualified despite my age, I replied, "My age has given me proximity to the challenges facing younger Americans, while my experience has given me the wisdom to apply the law fairly. Justice doesn't require decades of life. It requires commitment to equal treatment under the law. The committee voted 13-9 in favor of my nomination. The full Senate confirmed me 2 weeks later. At 33, I became the youngest federal judge in my district and one of the youngest in the country. The media attention was unexpected. The New York Times ran a profile titled, "The New Face of the Federal Judiciary." Local news celebrated a hometown success story. Legal blogs analyzed my prosecution record for clues about my judicial philosophy. Suddenly, I wasn't just Judge Madison Mitchell, I was a symbol of generational change in the courts. 1 month after my confirmation, I received an unexpected call from my mother. "I saw you on the morning news," she said, her voice tentative. "You were very articulate." "Thank you," I replied, unsure where the conversation was heading. A pause. "Your father watched it too." He didn't say anything, but he watched the whole segment. This small acknowledgement shouldn't have mattered, but it did. "How are you, Mom?" "Really?" Her voice cracked slightly. "I'm proud of you, Madison." I should have said that more often. We began a careful reconnection, weekly phone calls, cautious sharing of our lives. She never directly criticized my father or Thomas, but I sense her growing recognition of how I had been treated. For her birthday, I sent a first edition of Jane Austen's Persuasion, remembering it had been her favorite in college. She called me sobbing after opening it. "No one has acknowledged that part of me in decades," she admitted. My judicial work kept me grounded through this emotional evolution. Each case represented real people with real problems requiring thoughtful consideration. I developed a reputation for thorough written opinions and respectful treatment of everyone in my courtroom, from defendants to court personnel. 6 months into my judgeship, I launched a mentorship program for young women interested in legal careers. We partnered with local high schools and colleges to provide shadowing opportunities, internships, and scholarship assistance. The program particularly targeted girls from backgrounds traditionally underrepresented in the legal profession. One of our first participants was Angela Rivera, a brilliant first-generation college student whose single mother worked 3 jobs to support her education. When Angela told me her family had initially discouraged her legal ambitions, preferring she pursue something more suitable for a woman, I recognized my own story. "Sometimes the people who should support you the most understand you the least," I told her. "Build your own support system of people who see your potential." Meanwhile, news from Boston arrived sporadically through my mother's calls. Thomas's investment firm had lost a major client. My father had stepped back from day-to-day operations due to health concerns. Thomas was struggling to maintain the business relationships my father had cultivated over decades. "Your brother works very long hours," my mother said during one call, her voice heavy with unspoken worry. "Rebecca is essentially raising the boys alone." I felt a complex mix of emotions, concern for my nephews whom I barely knew, sympathy for Rebecca despite our differences, and yes, a small, ungenerous satisfaction that Thomas was finally facing challenges his privilege couldn't automatically overcome. My personal life transformed as well. After years of putting career first, I met Daniel Harrison at a legal education conference where we were both speaking, a law professor specializing in restorative justice. He approached me after my presentation on reforming victim notification systems. "Your approach balances justice and compassion in a way I rarely see," he said, his dark eyes thoughtful behind wire-rimmed glasses. Our coffee to discuss legal theory turned into dinner, which turned into months of intellectual and emotional connection. Unlike previous relationships where I had downplayed my ambition to avoid intimidating partners, with Daniel I could be fully myself. He found my success attractive rather than threatening, my dedication admirable rather than inconvenient. 8 months after my confirmation, the Washington Post ran a feature on America's new judiciary, highlighting several young judges, including me. The article detailed my path from prosecutor to the federal bench, my mentorship program, and my thoughtful approach to sentencing alternatives. 2 days after it was published, my mother called. "Madison," she said, her voice unusually animated, "you won't believe this. Your father has the Post article framed in his study." "What?" I nearly dropped my phone. "He hasn't said anything directly, but last night at the Petersons' dinner, someone mentioned your work on that juvenile sentencing case. For the first time ever, he didn't change the subject. He actually said, 'Madison has always had a strong sense of justice.'" I sat down, momentarily speechless. After a moment, my mother continued, her voice lower. "He's been questioning things. Madison. After his heart attack, something changed. He's been reviewing old decisions, wondering if he was too rigid about certain things." Before I could process this revelation, she added, "Thomas and Rebecca are renewing their vows for their 5th anniversary. There's going to be a small ceremony and rehearsal dinner. Thomas doesn't know I'm telling you this, but I think you should be there. I think it's time." My immediate instinct was to refuse. After Thomas's Thanksgiving declaration, why would I subject myself to more rejection? But Daniel, who had heard enough about my family to understand the complexity, offered perspective. "Sometimes people need a chance to be better than they've been," he said as we discussed it over dinner. "And sometimes we need to witness that change to heal our own wounds." After much deliberation, I accepted the invitation, asking if Daniel could accompany me. My mother's delighted acceptance of this request told me everything I needed to know about her hopes for reconciliation. 2 weeks before the event, an unexpected envelope arrived with a Boston postmark. Inside was a formal invitation to Thomas and Rebecca's vow renewal, addressed to the Honorable Madison Mitchell and guest. Beneath the printed text was a handwritten note in what I recognized as Thomas's handwriting. "It would mean a lot if you could come. T." No apology. No direct acknowledgement of his previous behavior, but a small opening nonetheless. With equal parts hope and trepidation, Daniel and I made plans to fly to Boston. The rehearsal venue was a historic Boston hotel where generations of elite families had celebrated their milestones. As Daniel and I entered the ornate reception room, I felt the weight of family history and expectations settle on my shoulders once again. "You okay?" Daniel squeezed my hand. "I will be," I replied, scanning the room for familiar faces. My mother spotted us first, hurrying over with a nervous smile. "Madison, you came." Her hug was less awkward than at Thanksgiving, lingering a moment longer than usual. "And this must be Daniel. It's lovely to meet you." My father approached more cautiously, his posture stiff, but his expression less severe than I remembered. "Madison," he nodded, extending his hand. "Good to see you." To Daniel, he added, "Robert Mitchell. Welcome." Conversations with extended family proved awkward but manageable. Aunt Patricia exclaimed over my impressive career, though her tone suggested surprise that I had a career at all. Uncle William asked probing questions about my liberal rulings, which Daniel smoothly deflected with good humor. Cousins I hadn't seen in years offered surface-level pleasantries without depth. Thomas and Rebecca were busy with the wedding coordinator when we arrived, so our initial greeting was postponed. I watched my brother from across the room, noting new lines of stress around his eyes, a slight softening around his jawline. 5 years of marriage and fatherhood had changed him physically, but I wondered if anything had changed beneath the surface. The rehearsal itself was mercifully brief, as guests rather than participants. Daniel and I observed from the sidelines as the immediate family practiced their procession and positioning. Thomas looked uncomfortable in the spotlight, while Rebecca glowed with happiness. Their sons, now 6 and 4, fidgeted in their little suits until Thomas shot them a stern look reminiscent of our father. After the rehearsal came cocktail hour, where Daniel and I found ourselves in conversation with Rebecca's parents. Her father, a retired surgeon, asked thoughtful questions about my judicial philosophy. Her mother mentioned reading about my mentorship program. "So important for girls to see women in positions of authority," she commented, casting a glance toward Rebecca, who was instructing hotel staff about the dinner arrangement. It was during this conversation that Rebecca finally noticed me across the room. I watched as her expression transformed from polite hostess to shocked recognition. She excused herself from the staff and made her way directly toward me, her eyes wide. When she reached our small group, she did something entirely unexpected. She dipped slightly at the knees, almost a curtsy, and said in a voice loud enough to turn heads, "Your Honor." "I didn't know you'd be here." The room didn't exactly fall silent, but conversation definitely dimmed. Thomas, who had been chatting with groomsmen nearby, turned sharply at his fiancée's words. His face flushed as he quickly moved to join us. "You're Judge Mitchell," Rebecca continued, genuine admiration in her voice. I had no idea Thomas's sister was the Judge Mitchell who handled the Westfield case. "Yes, that was one of my recent cases," I confirmed, acutely aware of the attention we were attracting. "My sister is a public defender in that district," Rebecca explained excitedly. "She said your ruling on pretrial detention procedures was the most sensible approach she's seen in years." Thomas reached us, his expression a complex mix of emotions I couldn't fully decipher. "Rebecca, I see you've reconnected with Madison." "Thomas, why didn't you tell me your sister is the Judge Mitchell everyone in Amanda's office has been talking about?" Rebecca's tone held genuine reproach. "I've been hearing about her work for months without making the connection." Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't realize you'd be interested in Madison's professional activities." Rebecca turned to me. "Your mentorship program, my sister said it's changed the trajectory for several young women in her community. One of her clients' daughters just got accepted to pre-law at UMass because of your scholarship fund." The genuine enthusiasm in her voice was disarming. All these months, I had mentally categorized Rebecca as an extension of my brother and father, traditional, dismissive of my choices. Yet here she was, speaking about my work with informed appreciation. Thomas cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should move into the dining room. They're about to serve dinner." Of course, Rebecca agreed, but then added, "Judge Mitchell, Madison, I'd love to hear more about your work later. Amanda would never forgive me if I didn't take this opportunity to learn more about your juvenile justice initiatives." As she moved away to direct guests to their tables, Thomas remained, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. "Your wife seems lovely," Daniel offered, extending his hand. "I'm Daniel Harrison, by the way." Thomas shook it automatically. "Thomas Mitchell." "Yes, Rebecca is. She has many interests I'm still discovering, apparently." He turned to me. "I didn't know you'd bring someone." "Mom said it was fine," I replied, my defenses rising instinctively. "No, it's good." "It's good you're not alone." Thomas ran a hand through his hair. A nervous gesture I remembered from childhood. "Look, Madison." Whatever he planned to say was interrupted by the dinner announcement. We moved into the dining room, where I discovered we had been seated at the same table as Thomas and Rebecca, along with my parents and Rebecca's sister Amanda, who nearly knocked over her water glass in excitement when she realized who I was. "Your pretrial release opinion was the most cogent analysis I've seen in years," she gushed, ignoring her sister's amused expression. "You managed to balance public safety concerns with the presumption of innocence in a way that actually works in practice." Throughout dinner, the conversation repeatedly turned to my work, with Amanda asking informed questions and Rebecca showing surprising knowledge of legal issues. My mother watched these exchanges with quiet satisfaction, while my father listened with an attentiveness I had never experienced from him. Thomas, however, grew increasingly withdrawn, contributing little beyond perfunctory responses when directly addressed. As dessert was served, Rebecca excused herself to check on their sons, who were with a sitter in a hotel room upstairs. In her absence, Amanda continued her enthusiastic legal discussion until her father gently suggested she'd give the judge a break from work talk. During a momentary lull, Thomas abruptly stood. "Madison, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" All eyes turned to us. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table, a silent question. I nodded reassuringly to him and followed Thomas to a small anteroom off the main dining area. Thomas closed the door and turned to face me, his expression conflicted. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. "I didn't know," he finally said. "Didn't know what?" "About your work. The impact you're having." He gestured vaguely toward the dining room. "Rebecca's sister has apparently been singing your praises for months." I thought she was talking about some other Judge Mitchell. I crossed my arms. Would it have mattered if you had known? Thomas looked away. "I don't know. Maybe." He moved to the small window overlooking the hotel garden. "Things haven't been what I expected." "What do you mean?" "The family business. Marriage. All of it." He turned back to me. "Dad's been grooming me to take over since I was in diapers, but I'm not him. The clients know it. The partners know it." I had never heard my brother speak with such raw honesty. "Thomas." "No, let me finish. I've been," he struggled visibly with the words, "jealous of you for years." "Jealous? Of me?" I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. "You were the golden child, the heir apparent. Everything was handed to you." "That's just it," he said quietly. "Everything was handed to me, including expectations I never questioned. You fought for everything you have. You made your own path. And now," he gestured helplessly, "you're respected for what you've accomplished. Not for your last name." I stood speechless, trying to reconcile this vulnerable admission with the brother who had declared me a family disappointment just a year ago. "What I said at Thanksgiving," Thomas continued, his voice dropping. "It was unforgivable. I was watching the family business struggle, feeling like a failure. And then you show up with this prestigious nomination." He shook his head. "It was easier to lash out than admit you might have chosen the better path." "Thomas, I never wanted to compete with you. I just wanted to be accepted for who I am. I know that now." He met my eyes directly. "Rebecca helped me see it. She's not who you think she is, not who I thought she was either, honestly. Behind the perfect society wife exterior, she has strong opinions and ambitions of her own. Watching her sister's legal career has made her question choices she made to please her family." "That sounds familiar," I said softly. "Yeah." Thomas attempted a smile. "Turns out we Mitchell siblings have more in common than I thought." He hesitated, then added, "I'm sorry, Madison. For Thanksgiving. For years of not being the brother you deserved." The apology, unexpected and sincere, cracked something open inside me. Years of hurt didn't disappear, but the possibility of healing suddenly seemed real. "Thank you for saying that." I managed. "It means a lot." Thomas nodded, looking relieved and uncertain at the same time. "So, this Daniel guy, he seems like he actually gets you." "He does," I confirmed, grateful for the slight shift to safer conversational ground. "He's a law professor specializing in restorative justice." "Restorative justice," Thomas repeated thoughtfully. "That's about repairing harm instead of just punishing the offender, right?" I couldn't hide my surprise at his knowledge. "Yes, exactly. I've been reading some of your opinions," he admitted sheepishly. "Don't tell Dad." A knock at the door interrupted us. Rebecca peeked in, concern evident on her face. "Everything okay in here?" "People are starting to notice you're both missing." Thomas looked at me questioningly. I nodded and turned to Rebecca with a genuine smile. "Everything's fine. We were just catching up on lost time." As we rejoined the dinner, Thomas whispered, "We have a lot more to talk about, if you're willing." "I am," I replied, realizing I truly meant it. The vow renewal ceremony the next day was intimate and surprisingly touching. Thomas and Rebecca had written their own vows, And I was struck by the genuine emotion in my brother's voice as he promised to continue growing together. Rebecca's vows included a pledge to always speak her truth with love, which earned a knowing glance from Thomas. The real surprise came just before the ceremony began, when Rebecca approached me with an unexpected request. "Madison, I know this is last minute, but would you consider doing a reading? We had Thomas's college roommate planned, but he's down with food poisoning." "Me? Are you sure?" I glanced at Thomas, expecting hesitation, but he nodded encouragingly. "We'd be honored," Rebecca said. "There's a passage about growth and forgiveness that seems appropriate." And so I found myself standing before the gathered family and friends, reading words about how love means allowing each other to change and grow. As I spoke, I caught my mother wiping away tears and, more surprisingly, my father listening with unusual attentiveness. At the reception afterward, my father approached me as I stood with Daniel near the cake table. "That was well done," he said stiffly. "The reading." "Thank you," I replied, equally formal. Daniel, sensing the tension, excused himself to get drinks, leaving us in a rare moment of privacy. My father cleared his throat. "Your mother tells me your work on juvenile sentencing has received national attention." "Yes. I've been developing alternative approaches for first-time nonviolent offenders. Studies show." "I've read some of the studies," he interrupted, surprising me again. At my expression, he added, "After your confirmation, I wanted to understand what you were doing. Why it mattered to you." The admission left me momentarily speechless. "I still don't agree with all your methods," he continued, "but I can see that you're making a difference. It's not the path I would have chosen for you," but he paused, visibly struggling. "It's a path worthy of respect." Coming from my father, this qualified endorsement felt monumental. "That means a lot to me," I said honestly. He nodded, looking uncomfortable with the emotional territory. "Your young man, he seems solid." "Smart." "He is," I confirmed. Another nod. "Good." He glanced across the room where my mother was chatting with Daniel. "Your mother has missed you." "We both have, in our way." Before I could respond to this unprecedented admission, he straightened his shoulders. "Well, I should greet the Hendersons. They just arrived." With that, he retreated to more comfortable social territory, but something had shifted between us, however slightly. Over the following year, these small shifts accumulated into meaningful change. My parents attended my investiture ceremony when I was elevated to the appellate court 9 months later. My father sat stiffly in his formal suit, but he stood and applauded with genuine pride when I took the oath. Thomas and I established a cautious but growing rapport through regular phone calls. He shared his struggles with the family business and his gradual realization that he might want a different career path. I listened without judgment, offering support without solutions, a new dynamic for both of us. When Thomas and Rebecca announced they were expecting their third child, a girl this time, they asked me to be her godmother. "We want her to have a strong female role model," Thomas explained, "someone who carved her own path." The christening brought the entire family together again. As I held my tiny niece, Sophia Madison Mitchell, I marveled at how much had changed in 2 years. My mother now spoke openly about her regrets regarding her own deferred dreams. My father, while still traditional in many ways, had begun asking my professional opinion on matters related to their charitable foundation's legal issues. Most surprisingly, Thomas had started taking night classes in educational administration, having discovered through coaching his son's t-ball team that he had a genuine passion for working with children. "I'm not cut out for finance," he admitted during a family dinner. "I never was. I was just trying to be what Dad wanted." My father, who would have once condemned such a statement as weakness, nearly said, "It takes courage to find your own way." Then, with a glance toward me, he added, "Some in this family learned that lesson earlier than others." My own professional journey continued to evolve. The mentorship program expanded to 3 additional districts, now supporting over 50 young women annually. My judicial philosophy, balancing accountability with opportunity for redemption, shaped important precedents in juvenile justice reform. And my relationship with Daniel deepened into a partnership of equals, both personally and intellectually. One evening, after a particularly challenging case involving a 16-year-old defendant, I found myself reflecting on how my family experiences had shaped my approach to justice. The teenager had committed a serious offense, but showed genuine remorse and potential for rehabilitation. In my chambers, drafting an opinion that would give him a structured second chance rather than mere punishment, I recognized how my own journey from rejection to reconciliation informed my belief in transformation. I thought of Thomas, who had finally found courage to step away from our father's firm to become a school administrator. I thought of my father, who at 75 was learning, however haltingly, to question his rigid worldview. I thought of my mother, who had recently enrolled in a master's program in English literature, fulfilling the academic passion she had set aside decades ago. People can change. Relationships can heal. These truths that I witnessed in my family now underpinned my judicial philosophy as well. During a speaking engagement at a law school the following month, a student asked what personal experiences had most influenced my approach to justice. Understanding that people are more than their worst moments, I answered after careful consideration. That transformation is possible when we allow others the space to grow beyond our limited perceptions of them. And that sometimes, the deepest wounds can become sources of wisdom if we're brave enough to learn from them. Later that evening, I received a text from Thomas with a photo of his daughter wearing a toy judge's robe his son had gotten in a career day kit. The caption read, "Sophia says she wants to be like Aunt Madison when she grows up." Setting the bar high from the start, the journey from family disappointment to respected judge, from painful estrangement to cautious reconciliation, had taught me that our worth isn't determined by others' limited vision of us. True success comes not from external validation, but from the courage to define it on our own terms. And sometimes, those who once rejected us may eventually find their way back, if we're willing to leave the door open to possibility. As I look back on that moment when Rebecca first called me Your Honor at the rehearsal dinner, I realize it wasn't about the title or the recognition. It was about being seen, truly seen for who I am and what I contribute to the world. That recognition didn't come from where I expected it, but it opened a path to healing I hadn't believed possible. Have you ever been underestimated by those closest to you, only to find validation from unexpected sources? Share your story in the comments below. And if this journey of standing firm in your own worth despite family disapproval resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that they too can define success on their own terms. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth isn't diminished by others' inability to see it.